I'm Rob Kittredge for the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and we share standing at these hearings with the Democracy Fund and Citizens for Freedom. I'd like to circle back to a bit of a constitutional conversation I had the other day. Cabinet confidentiality, the principle that members of Cabinet are free to express their opinions on issues before Cabinet fully in private meetings and discussions with you and their Cabinet colleagues. Are you familiar with that principle?
Yes, I am.
And the principle of Cabinet solidarity, where once decisions are presented to the public or to Parliament, they are collective decisions of the Cabinet and can't be repudiated or criticized by your ministers. And if they were to do that, they would have to resign their post.
That is a principle, yes.
All right. Tow trucks have come up a lot at this commission, and my friends and the commissioner know me by now as a bit of a towing aficionado. It's been a while since I brought up the subject, but I thought maybe you and I could have a little talk about it. As you know, in order to legitimately and legally declare a public order emergency pursuant to the Emergencies Act, the purported emergency cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law of Canada. You're taking the position that the emergency declaration was justified in part because towing services were required and could not be procured. Is that accurate?
That's a bit of a leap. We say that the Emergencies Act was required because the situation as a whole could not be resolved under existing authorities and was not being resolved under existing authorities.
Right, but towing service procurement was part of that total picture that you're talking about, wasn't it?
One of the barriers that we heard regularly from police of jurisdiction to removing the trucks occupying various locations was the difficulty in securing towing services. Yes, that was one of the barriers they were facing in being able to restore public order.
Right. So one of the measures that you put in place through the emergency measures regulations was an ability to compel tow truck drivers to provide towing services, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So I'd say that would be a fairly significant part of the reason why you would have had to invoke the Emergencies Act. Wouldn't you agree with that?
It was an element of the solutions to the situation that we were dealing with. Yes.
It was one of a handful of powers that you created using the emergency measures regulations. Is that right?
Yes.
So I would say it's relatively important. Would you agree with that?
It was important in yes, solving the emergency situation. Yes.
Certainly relevant to the invocation of the Emergencies Act?
The invocation of the Emergencies Act wasn't because people couldn't find tow trucks. The invocation was because there was a public order emergency that posed serious threats to Canadians, and the inability to solve this public order emergency that posed a serious threat to the safety of Canadians was compounded by the inability to actually move those trucks, for example.
And that would be one of the ways that the emergency couldn't have been effectively dealt with under any other law of Canada, wouldn't you say?
Municipalities and provinces have contracts with tow truck companies to keep the highways clear, to keep the roads clear, and tow parked cars that are illegally parked all the time. So they had theoretically the authority to compel people under breach of contract to actually tow vehicles that were illegally parked. For various reasons, they were unable or unwilling to use the civil powers they have under contract, or perhaps it would just take too long for them to be able to do it. But in feedback with everyone from Alberta to Ontario to elsewhere, was that they needed to be able to compel those tow trucks to actually do the job of clearing those streets.
And you, in fact, put that power into the emergency measures regulations.
Yes, we did.
And so a discussion of tow trucks is relevant to this discussion we're having right now.
Yes.
And we talked about cabinet solidarity earlier. There's been a waiver of cabinet confidence, the related partial waiver, I should say, of cabinet confidence, the related principle that would have allowed you to withhold documents from this commission. You've disclosed quite a few, and would you say you've been pretty transparent with the commission?
There have been hundreds of public inquiries over the course of our country's history, and only 4 times were there waivers of cabinet confidence. For this situation, it was extremely important to me that all the inputs, or as many inputs as possible, that cabinet received in making the determinations that we did, are visible to Canadians. So yes, we've waived cabinet confidence in terms of the inputs that cabinet heard to make the decision, but the actual deliberations, as you point out, remain secret.
Great. So you wanted to make sure that the relevant matters were visible to Canadians. Can I pull up POE JCF 2, please? So this is a document as it's coming up. We've been having a bit of an argument over the last little while about some redactions that were made in the documents disclosed by my Friends for Canada. And there were some disputes about parliamentary privilege and irrelevance. But in this particular document, I'd like you to take a look at this. This first document was what was originally disclosed. And this document, the second one, had some redactions removed and those documents were ordered disclosed last night, and Canada took the position last night that there was reason to insist on this redaction, or that this document not be produced unredacted. But I wonder if maybe you could, and at the end of the day, this was produced at 10:26 a.m. this morning, so I'm a little more unprepared for this cross than I normally am. But I wonder if you could look at that first redaction on the original disclosure and see if you can see the reason for the redaction that's highlighted in the black box there.
It appears to say irrelevant and parliamentary privilege.
Right. So I'm looking at the irrelevant one. Could you identify on the other side what information was blacked out as irrelevant by your government?
Americans offering tow trucks.
Yeah. And wouldn't you say that discussion of tow trucks was relevant to the discussion we're having here today?
I'm not the one who made these redactions. It's the professional public service that made those redactions, so you'd have to ask them.
Right. Well, I think we will be. But in any event, I would put it to you that tow trucks weren't in fact required, that the power to compel tow trucks was not used for anything other than convenience, and that tow trucks had been secured at all important locations prior to the invocation of the Emergencies Act. And I got to say, it's interesting to close on this tow truck point. I hadn't expected that to happen. But would you agree with me that tow trucks weren't in fact needed at the time of the invocation of the Act?
Mr. Commissioner, Brian Gover for the Government of Canada. And if my friend is going to put that to the witness, he ought to put the proposition correctly. I remind my friend that the evidence of Commissioner Carrick of the Ontario Provincial Police was that the powers under the Emergency Measures Regulation in relation to tow trucks were used. I refer specifically to his February 22nd, 2022 report to Deputy Solicitor General Di Tommaso, which shows that clearly those powers were used. Thank you.
Right. Well, I would respond by saying that the evidence so far has shown that while strictly speaking there was an invocation of, or there was a use of that power under the Act by the OPP, it was basically used as a method to ensure that the payment was made.
It's supposed to come to me, and I think those happen to be areas that I'm going to have to deal with, what is in fact the case. But you can pose your question in a different way if you wish, but I think whether or not they were used, whether or not it was required, is something I will.
I think we're bearing the lead a little bit here, and I'll ask you again. You would agree that a discussion of tow trucks and information about tow trucks is relevant to the work of the Commission and the discussion that we're having here today, wouldn't you?
I know there was a lot of time spent on tow trucks during the past 6 weeks.
Right. Well, thank you very much.